Welcome back maybe to Murdoch's Music Minute. Yes, it's another fresh review, which means I'm going to look at a more recent release as opposed to the usually rather old records that I talk about on this channel. But for today's fresh review, I'm going to try something slightly different because this is going to be a twofer. So that's right, which means the two of us, we're going to talk about two different albums simultaneously, and the fastest one wins a chewing gum. Internet clowns. Ever met one? A twofer, which means I'm going to review two albums in one video. If that sounds like a bargain to you, stay tuned. Well, if I had any tattoos, I would certainly show them in this episode, which deals with two recent albums by two big alternative rock acts. They know each other, they're good pals, and they've released their respective new albums within, I think, a few weeks of each other. I'm talking about the new Foo Fighters album, But Here We Are, and the new album by the Queens of the Stone Age, In Times New Roman. So prepare yourselves for those crunchy guitars and meet two middle-aged men in various states of crisis. Let's start with the latest release by Josh Homme and his band, the Queens of the Stone Age. It's been an ever-changing lineup with the Queens, and Homme being the only constant member and clearly the leader of this outfit. The new album is called In Times New Roman, and of course is not about fonts and letter designs on the computer. Josh Homme has been seen washing a lot of dirty laundry in the press in recent years, not always voluntarily. There have been scandals regarding provocative statements, the kicking of a journalist, and most of all, the war of the roses between him and his longtime partner, Brody Dalle, singer of the Distillers. They split up, and there has been fighting over custody for children. You name it, not the best time for Josh Homme in the last few years. He also had to cope with deaths in his personal surroundings. A lot of bad press, actually. And we haven't had any new Queens of the Stone Age album for a couple of years now. The last two ones were like Clockwork and Villains, which received so-so responses from critics and the public. I think they are not the best that the Queens of the Stone Age have done, but they are pretty solid albums with quite interesting stylistic departures from the full-on heavy stoner desert rock that the Queens of the Stone Age have become known for from their earliest albums. So what about this latest one? It features 10 tracks and sees Josh Homme more or less washing more dirty laundry and coping with his personal conflicts and his relationship troubles. The album starts with a track called Obscenery. This is bone-dry, heavy desert rock. We get the fuzzy guitars that the Queens of the Stone Age are known for. Homme is in a spiteful mood in the lyrics, not only on this opening track, but throughout most of the album. So that's the mission statement for In Times New Roman. But there is a surprise string break in the song, and strings reoccur in other songs on the album as well. Obscenery is followed by Paper Machete. This is a heavy, stormy rocker, more up-tempo. It contains the typical cool and always slightly weird guitar work that we hear on a lot of Queens of the Stone Age tracks throughout their whole discography. This song is addressed against somebody who stylizes herself as a victim. Now I know you'd use anything, anyone, to make yourself look clean. This certainly is a shot at Brody Dalle, at least in my book. Also, the drug problems of both of them have been the topic of public press articles. But this is good material for Queens of the Stone Age fans, indeed. The album continues with a track called Negative Space, and there certainly is a lot of negative space on this album. It's another heavy mid-tempo alt-rock track. It features a great chorus and seems to be about losing trust and the final disappointment in or from a relationship. But with such a solidly rocking band, I'm sure Homme will easily find his way back to earth. Track number 4 is called Time and Place. This one evolves around a tricky, syncopated guitar lick. There are also some spacey guitar effects. It's a very cool, but also gritty song in terms of the lyrics. And we get a strong dose of hurt pride or hurt masculinity on this one. If I may quote from the lyrics, "You're such a drag, all that's left is a decent butt." If you're a pretty boy, you've got to save face. It's all wrong. Let's get it over. I don't know what female listeners will get from this album, but this certainly is a spiky, twisting, but also grooving track. Song number 5, and thus in the middle of the album, is a track called Made to Parade. This goes back to mid-tempo, which dominates the album. It's a dark, swampy boogie track about a failed relationship, which here is compared to being chained to and working like a slave for a company. The coda of the song is surprisingly happy sounding and rather catchy. Next up is Carnevoyeur, another play with words here. Homme is in a bleak, frustrated mode on this slow, grinding rock track and seems to take delight in it. The strings are back, and Homme almost delivers a very tender, tuneful singing style on this one. I haven't really heard him do that on other albums. It's a subtle change in his voice, but it is noticeable. The next song is What the Peephole Say, or What the Peephole Say. It's a more ferocious, maybe the most ferocious rock track of the album. Again, Homme here takes on a very defiant, I don't give a fuck stance. It's a quite infectious rocker, to be honest, and seems to be addressed at, well, the public or the press that, as I've mentioned before, is very much busy with pulling out his dirty laundry and, well, everybody voicing their opinion about it.
Don't care what the people know. The world's gonna end in a month or so. You may run the institution and run into facility, but you don't run her, you don't run me. I don't care what the people say. Got a tip for your trip, cop, stop and play.
Next one is Sicily. This is a stomping mid-tempo track. It has one of those meandering Queens of the Stone Age, slightly arabesque hook lines. You get a lot of those, especially on earlier records like Rated R or Songs for the Deaf. As far as I interpret it, the lyrics are about a sort of self-destructive love and lust. It's a dark and a bit psychedelic track, quite interesting. Then we get to the penultimate entry on the album, and this was chosen as the first single. It's called Emotion Sickness. It stumbles and stutters like a dizzy drunk, but despite this maybe strange description, it really manages to be one of the catchiest songs of the entire album, and with harmony vocals in the chorus. So that's quite interesting. The chorus actually is rather laid back, tuneful, not very heavy due to those harmony vocals. Quite catchy. I get a little bit of a faint West Coast rock feel with this, though of course the backbone of this track as well is heavy alternative rock. And there's more sneering verses here about the emotional drain of relations.
And my feeling broke. Baby, don't care for me. Baby, don't care for me. Never let it go.
And finally, we get to the closing track. Straight Jacket Fitting is at its core a quite bluesy track, actually, and I think this must be fun to play as a band. In the lyrics, Homme turns away from his personal gripes that he dealt with in the 9 tracks before, and provides a more, a look at the wider society in general, describing the feeling of, well, more or less everything going down. And this is a bit a song about dancing on the eve of the absolute downfall of society, the decadence of a society that is facing decline, actually. This is a bit of a strange overall subject to close the album with, but it features the album's title, and once again shows that the Queens of the Stone Age probably are one of the best rock bands in a classic sense that are still around in these days. The Queens of the Stone Age are pretty much themselves on In Time's New Roman, whilst the 2 albums preceding it had stylistic experiments. This one is pretty much straight, heavy, gritty alternative rock with the warm winds of the desert still blowing through. Not as uncontrolled and ferocious as, say, Rated R or Songs for the Deaf, where the Queens of the Stone Age really didn't take any prisoners. This is more controlled, more thought over, and, as I've said, more mid-tempo. And I guess this album is or will be a bit of a grower. I think you have to listen to it several times to sort of get into the mood, get into the groove and sound of this album. And of course, you have to tolerate the very personal sneer of Homme in most of the lyrics, as mentioned. And of course, we only get his version of events here on this album. Overall, I think this is a solid album, a more than solid album. I'm happy the Queens of the Stone Age are back. Is In Times New Roman a lot better than, say, Villains? To be honest, I don't think so. Why? While Villains and Like Clockwork were maybe as albums a little bit inconsistent, to me they had a few clear standout tracks and some, sonic surprises, some experimentation that mostly worked out. In Times New Roman is very unified, but that also makes it a little bit not monotonous, but some of the tracks are a bit samey to me, and there are only a few really real highlights on In Times New Roman. But on the other hand, this album maybe is a little bit more consistent as a whole compared to the predecessor albums. So my rating for this one would be a 7.5 out of 10. As I've said, I have the feeling this might be a grower, so maybe this will, at one point during the summer, scrape the 8 out of 10 for me. I'm not sure. I'll find out with repeat listens. So much to Josh Homme, who really had a few bad years. Now let's move on to a guy who probably will never have any bad press. Rock and roll's darling, Mr. Dave Grohl and his band, the Foo Fighters. A heavily anticipated album. It has received several quite positive, enthusiastic reviews, actually, and very often has been described, at least in reviews that I've seen and read, as a very strong return to form and as probably the strongest Foo Fighters album in years. And now it is, I guess, well known that this album not only reflects a time of grief and crisis, but also was recorded in the wake of a huge crisis and tragedy for the whole band, and especially, I guess, for Dave Grohl personally. His longtime Foo Fighters drummer, Taylor Hawkins, passed away in early 2022 while the band was on tour. He was found lifeless in his hotel room, and this, of course, was not only a great loss to the band, to the world of music, to the fans, but also meant that the Foo Fighters were done, at least for a certain period of time. But now they have returned. They have announced an official new drummer. On this album, however, Dave Grohl handles the drums himself. And it is not surprising that this album heavily deals with grief, death, and loss in general. It's not only Taylor Hawkins we're talking about here. Dave Grohl also had to go through another very personal loss. His mother died as well not too long ago. And around that, there's also the death of other musician friends, Mark Lanegan, for example, who also played with the Queens of the Stone Age. So here the circle comes to a full close, more or less. So what can we expect from this latest Foo Fighters album? The cover is, if you don't look too carefully, it looks like it's simply white. It isn't. There are, like very pale silver lines. It's like staring into a void or of white noise and nothingness. The band announced that this would be a brutally honest and emotionally extremely raw record in tribute of Taylor Hawkins and Dave Grohl's mother. To be honest, I went into this album with a certain amount of fear because I was really expecting to get hit over the head with a very heavy, intense album, not necessarily musically, but in terms of the lyrics and the whole atmosphere. So what's my experience with this new album and what's my opinion? Like the Queens of the Stone Age album, this one is quite concise. It's 10 tracks, a neat number of songs, and a sensible run time for this album. We start with Rescue, which was also, I think, the first single taken off this album. And from the very get-go, the Foo Fighters leave no doubt that this is not going to be a low-key, depressed and subdued affair. It blasts out of the speakers in typical Foo Fighters fashion, a very anthemic alternative rock sound, very forceful performance, especially Grohl's vocals. He very often shouts and yells on this album. The guitars are super fat in terms of production, very distorted, a lot of overdrive, and you can really sense not so much maybe grief or an introspection here, but a lot of anger actually in Dave Grohl. But all this comes with one of those typical Foo Fighter choruses, which is always very anthemic, as mentioned, post-grungy, but always with a certain pop sensitivity, so you can easily play this on mainstream rock radio. And this display of anger and frustration continues also on the next track, Under You. This is where we obviously or very clearly get into the themes of this album. It's another pleasant, very typical Foo Fighters rock tune, always with a very forceful production. And to be honest, while this is a very solid track, one can accuse it of just being yet another of Dave Grohl's tunes that follows the tried and proven formula of how to put together a Foo Fighters rock song. It's powerful, it's anthemic, it has a lot of pressure going on, loud guitars, and again, Grohl's stadium-filling, shouty and growling singing style. Now, while this may seem a little bit more of the same, in the long run of the album, it actually makes sense because the band with the track order or the track sequencing allegedly also tried to put the various stages of grief to music. There is a famous theory or a model of stages of grief that start with anger, disbelief, and then develops later on into acceptance and calm acceptance. Not everybody who lives through the loss of a beloved person goes through all of these stages. Sometimes the stages also can overlap, but more or less, this is an accepted model of grief in psychology. So that is why, especially the first couple of tunes are quite loud, very guitar heavy, and as I've mentioned before, all have Grohl very much shouting and throaty vocals. And after a while, to be honest, this can become a little bit tiresome. The third track, Hearing Voices, starts more subtle, almost with a more 1980s new wave or slightly goth guitar sound. But then the chorus, as always, just relies on the powerful guitars and again Grohl's shouty vocals. The coda is just acoustic guitar and piano. So for the first time on this album, we get a little bit of change in the music and in the sound. And so far for me, this is the best track on the album.
I've been hearing voices, none of them are you. 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 I've seen you come.
Next up is the title track, But Here We Are. It features more overpowering vocals and guitars. Grohl audibly defies the tragic events, but he somehow, at this stage, does not arrive at really personal songs or personal songwriting. It seems all produced for huge stadium gigs, like the Foo Fighters songs that we've heard in the last couple of years on their last albums, actually. And this makes it a little bit, well, not alienating, but really hard to follow this supposedly raw emotion and this very personal take in the music that the band announced beforehand. Grohl screams against a almost, well, generic wall of noise that the band creates. And if it wasn't for the lyrics, to be honest, a lot of the songs in the first half of this album are more or less interchangeable and exchangeable with older Foo Fighters tracks, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the difference. The drumming, for me, is the best part of this song, of the title track, which is followed by track number 5, The Glass. This, for the first time, changes the pace and the mood of the album. It's a guitar ballad, it's a slower track, but after the first verse, also again drowns very often in the guitar overdrive. Nonetheless, this is a welcome change of pace. Other than that, however, I have to say it is an average Foo Fighters song. Next up is Nothing at All. This one has a nice, straightforward, steady groove in the verses. There's more throaty yelling and shouting in the chorus. Unfortunately, this really has become a bit of a tired formula of the Foo Fighters songs in general. Start with a rocking, nice verse, and then start, shouting as much as possible in the chorus. Again, we hear the defiant anger in Dave Grohl as he comes to the conclusion in the lyrics that he has to get by with nothing at all, which of course is a very bleak statement. It's supposed to express, the anger and the stiff upper lip approach, but there is a bleak frustration, actually, if you listen closely to the lyrics. The Foo Fighters certainly don't reinvent themselves with this track, but this is a really decent rocker, and together with hearing voices, a really good track.
Wouldn't it be dangerous if nothing was restraining us? I'll get by, maybe I won't. I can lie and say that I don't waste my time, maybe I know. Everything or nothing at all. Everything or nothing at all.
Then we get to the second half of the album, or this actually was the start of the second half. The next one is called Show Me How. This one sounds a little bit more indie rock or almost shoegaze influenced, at least in terms of the guitar textures and the sound of the guitars that is used. It also features great breathy background or harmony vocals by Violet Grohl, Dave Grohl's daughter. Great vocal performance. Reminded me a little bit of maybe Nina Persson from the Cardigans. So there's a bit more of a poppy sound to this track, but I can see why this was released as a single. It's really a great moment on the album, maybe also a bit of a choker here, if you're aware that this is Dave Grohl's daughter singing with him. It's more of an introspective song for more or less the first time on this album. And I was also reminded of bands like, for instance, the Manic Street Preachers while listening to this track. Maybe that's also why I really enjoy it. So here you could say after anger and frustration and sort of fighting against the reality of loss and death, now we're getting to the stages of contemplation and slowly but certainly to a stage of acceptance and maybe really integrating this experience of death into one's own biography. For me, this is the first really positively surprising track on the album.
I'll take care of everything from now on. Where are you now? Show me how. Where are you now? Show me.
Song number 8 is called Beyond Me. It starts with piano and then grows into an epic, well, let's say rock power ballad in the style of maybe the Beatles meet Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses. Yes, you may be surprised now, and while that may sound maybe terribly anachronistic or cheesy, it's actually a very enjoyable track. Then we get finally to The Teacher, a song that has been talked about a lot on the internet and in various reviews. because first of all, I think it is the longest song the Foo Fighters have ever officially released on a record. It's a little bit over 10 minutes. One could argue that the track before serves as the prelude to the final two tracks, which sort of form an important union on this album, a big finale. The Teacher is a dramatic track. As mentioned, it's 10 minutes long. It goes through a few changes. Maybe what we see here is a little faint echo or the remains of what Dave Grohl apparently had planned actually as the next Foo Fighters album before Taylor Hawkins died, because after the last studio album by the Foos, Medicine at Midnight, Dave Grohl had mentioned or stated in an interview that for the next album, the plan was to do a 180-degree turn and produce an insane prog rock album. Now, The Teacher isn't exactly prog rock. It's ultimately more a kind of epic alternative rock or post-grunge. Possibly there are 2 or 3 different song ideas that were put together to arrive at this 10-minute epic. But it's interesting to hear the Foo Fighters do this kind of lengthy and a little bit more experimental track, actually. It's certainly one of the more unusual entries on But Here We Are. And the second half of the song is again more shoegazy with mantra-like repetitions of the lyrics that eventually turn into a blast of white noise. It's a heartfelt goodbye to, I guess, mostly Taylor Hawkins and Grohl's mother. It's not a new rock epic that will floor generations to come, but it leads to the interesting thought experiment what could have been if the Foo Fighters would have gone more often for a more experimental sound on their albums, and more tracks that did not peer hard at rock radio format with each chorus.
Every page turns, it's a lesson learned in time. You showed me how to need, never showed me how to say goodbye. Try and make good with the others left. Counting every minute, living breath by breath by breath by breath by breath by breath.
The Teacher finally segues into the last track, which is simply called Rest. And this one finally is an absolute hard-hitting moment on the album, at least for me. The most emotional moment, I think, of the album comes at the end. It starts with only a soft guitar and very low, tender vocals from Dave at first. And then the song builds up into a last sort of rearing up with loud, overdriven guitars again, and a little bit of more screamy singing from Dave Grohl. But on this track, I think it's really convincing. It adds to the effect that the song is aiming for. And at the same time, this powerful outbreak also is somehow conciliatory in a strange way. Rest. You can rest now. And that's the quintessential message that we get at the end. It's an emotionally quite crushing elegy. And on the one hand, I wish the album really had more of those moments. And then again, I'm happy that the album hasn't got too many of those moments, because it really would have become very hard to listen to, because it definitely affects you emotionally. And I guess for people who are experiencing maybe at the moment a loss, or who remember beloved ones' phases of grief in their lives, this album can be either quite cathartic and helpful, but yeah, songs like Rest also can really bring up rather painful memories, maybe. Yeah. This is the Foo Fighters at their most emotional.
Rest, you can rest now.
I can easily imagine that it must have been rather hard for the band members to play these songs to record this album. But maybe at the same time, maybe there were also moments where they shared beautiful memories of their story with Taylor. So I don't know what the atmosphere was like in the studio. And you have to give Dave Grohl and company respect for that fact alone, to come out with an album like that after yeah, such a tragic event, such a rupture actually in the band history. I think is not easy. You could discuss whether bands should do that, or whether it would have been the better way to, silently disband and declare the Foo Fighters over. But I think that's not for us listeners to judge. This is certainly an important album in the Foo Fighters discography. Now, if I try to judge it more objectively, still I have to say it's not the masterpiece that other reviews try to make it. To be honest, especially the first half of this album is a bit Foo Fighters by numbers, even though the playing is intense, and the anger in Dave Grohl's voice is honest and authentic. But as I've said, especially those louder tracks in the first half are not really memorable to me, and didn't really reach me very much on an emotional level. The album is definitely saved by the second half for me, and that's why ultimately, but here we are, gets a 7 out of 10 from me. So there we are, 2 albums released within a short distance of each other by 2 well-known, well-respected, revered cult alternative rock bands. Both albums quite interesting. If you are fans of those bands, you cannot go wrong with these albums. If you maybe have been a fan of the Foo Fighters or the Queens of the Stone Age when they were still young and restless, and maybe you lost track a bit of their careers, these albums are definitely worth listening into, to maybe sort of re-energize your own fandom of these bands. However, ultimately, at the end of the day, I have to say that both of these albums, while really solid releases, remain a little bit below the big expectations that I had based on press releases and other reviews. But then again, hey, these bands look back at quite long careers now, and at this stage in their career, releasing 7 out of 10 albums, I think is a pretty good track record. And most of all, who am I to judge? Thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing. Let me know what your opinion of any of these albums is, or your opinion of the bands in general. I'll be back with more reviews or discography rankings or whatever comes to mind pretty soon, I guess. I think I haven't done a ranking video in quite a while, so yeah. Let's see what crazy ideas the hot and sticky summer will bring. So long. Thanks again. Stay tuned.